So welcome again, everyone. Thanks for coming. Just to introduce briefly, this is the penultimate lecture in this series. So far, we've had Jose Sanchez, Yewon Song, Trevor Schultz last week. Today, we'll be having Morakana, and we have Sebastian here from Morakana, who I'll introduce in a second. And then next Tuesday, we'll be closing with Francis Sang. So thanks, everyone, for coming so far, and please come next week as well. So to introduce, Morakana is a New York-based studio founded by Thierry Kananurik from Thailand and Sebastian Morales Prado from Mexico. Their work is characterized by experimentation, development of custom tools, and scientific and artistic inquiry. By leveraging scientific principles and challenging the role of technology in our lives, Morakana invites us to think critically about plausible means for nature to reclaim the physical and digital ecosystems we are part of. They teach at School for Poetic Computation, SFPC, and Collaborative Arts at NYU. Their work has been supported by Culture Hub, Autodesk Pier 9, Mana Contemporary, and Tropical Futures Institute, among others. Specifically today, we'll be joined by Sebastian from Morakana, who will take us through their work in a talk titled Bugs in the System, Nature Reclaiming Technology. As always, we'll have a brief Q&A afterwards, so make sure to kind of prep your questions in advance, and I'll turn it over now to Seb.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you for having me. I'm Sebastian Morales. I'm half of Morakana. Here we go. The other half is Thierry. She's not here right now. She's traveling, but we normally present together. And so this is a first for me. We'll be talking about bugs in the system, and this really connects a lot with our practice of understanding how means for nature to reclaim technology. We work a lot with the idea of symbiosis, both between hardware and software, nature and technology, and also between theory and Seb. I'll be sharing some projects with you. Some of them are different types of organisms that we build or work with. And they tend to be sometimes very playful, sometimes more dynamic. This one right here, it's a PCB. It's a printed circuit board. You might be familiar with printed circuit boards. They live everywhere in our lives today, like the electronics, computers. They're normally hidden inside of enclosures, but this one is meant to be breakaway and turn into a cactus. So thinking a lot about playful systems, modular systems, how can you make your own delightful object based on something that is not meant to be touched? Thinking a lot about industrial processes. PCBs are something that is manufactured at scale. You send your files, you get your PCBs, but how can you make something poetic with it, like something delightful? And as somebody who works a lot with software and hardware, you will experience a lot of bugs. And sometimes they are cute. This series of organisms is called CLIO, short for Cybernetic Lifeforms for Environmental Observation. They are a series of bristlebots. Are you familiar with bristlebots? Anybody? They're often type of toothbrush bots. So you have a toothbrush head, and then you put a motor, and then it shakes, and then it just moves around. It's very unpredictable. It kind of just bounces. The movement tends to be very organic. You can see it here. These ones in particular, they react to light. Some of them will run away from it. Some of them are kind of attracted to it. And this one with lots of bristles and the LEDs kind of goes around disturbing the system. Something interesting about them is that they all share the same software. They all share the same code. But because of difference in their hardware, in their how they're built by hand, how the sensors are labeled, they all end up behaving very differently. Here's kind of the whole family. So thinking a lot of how different small changes will create different, very divergent solutions. This project kind of really reminds me of our relationship with nature, because I don't know anybody. Well, I know a couple of people, but most of the people really hate cockroaches. Like they have this aversion to them, and it's kind of strange because these animals really thrive because of us. So in some way, they're this parallel to humans. They exist where we exist, but yet we have this like really aggressive revulsion towards them. So I think there's something interesting about that idea of like we want to be connected with nature, but certain types of nature we just find them so repugnant. So this is a way for us to deal with us as Morakana, Thierry and I, to deal with this idea of like these repulsive organisms that exist in our environment. This is a more digital ecosystem. We call it the Paramecium diner. Actually, let me see if I can pull it up. I don't know if that would work. Of course not. But I can find it. So it's this idea of it's like an interspecies place where these organisms come and feast on words. So as you type, well, hopefully you don't make typos, but you start feeding the cells. And then they slowly come and start digesting the words. And very slowly they will start distributing kind of around. They start breaking the sentences into words. And then if you wait long enough, there's different types of cells that come in and start further digesting the writing. And this comes from a tradition of writing, of poetry called constraint writing, where you have a set of rules and you use those rules to create meaning, basically. So in this case, where the way that the cells move is not purely random. It's really inspired by the way that these organisms move, Paramecium. So there's a set of rules, like where they're moving around. At some point, they will change speed or change direction. And if they find food, they kind of will move around there, trying to find if there's anything else. And then you can also feed them by hand. And they'll start growing. And then eventually they do mitosis. Let's see. Yeah, here in this video you see the amoeba on the top left that it then comes and further digests the food, the letters into the food into letters, and then kind of keeps destroying the meaning. That project came about after looking at like thousands of hours to the microscope through a different project. This project is called Symbiosis.live, and it was inspired by internet servers. Who here has a website? I'm sure everybody has a website. Yeah. Have you ever looked at the traffic that comes to your website? If you look at like Google Analytics or just like, or into the server, you start noticing that you get a lot of traffic that you don't even know why or where it's coming from. It's a lot of automated traffic, internet bots. And in some ways, their behavior is almost lifelike. And this sent us into a journey of really trying to understand what makes something living versus non-living. And I think the answer is not very easy. It's actually a hot topic into the scientific community, like what makes something alive. It should loop, but doesn't loop. So we created this bioreactor, which is this image you see here on the right, that hosts cells. And then we also created these internet servers that are designed to attract internet bots. So there's different ways you do that. You create websites with content, and then the internet bots come and read the content, and they find links, and then they keep going. So they can kind of get trapped in these servers. And depending on what they're looking for or what they're trying to do, the server would react differently and try to keep them coming back. Internet bots are really good at connecting with other internet bots, so they will start bringing more. And like you start seeing like almost these organic kind of swarms coming in at sometimes. We had this project on for over a year, so you certainly see these patterns of the servers being swarmed, and then it's kind of slow. And on the other side, you have the cells where the cells are growing, and then as you're looking at them through the microscope, you can start connecting them to the internet bots. So the internet bots will bring oxygen, light, and food, and then the cells will kind of further the interaction or close down the interaction of the servers. And this is how the cells look. They will be tracked with these computer vision programs. This project was done before, I guess, 2020. So I feel like in the past couple of years, just AI would really change the way this project would happen today. But I still think it's kind of informs a lot of our practice. And some of the questions it's asked is like, what makes something living versus non-living? What role do these organisms play in our lives? We don't see internet bots in the same way that we don't see microorganisms, and yet they completely control our lives. Like most of the internet traffic is automated. It's not human started or ignited. It's just these automated systems. In the same way that most of your cells are not yours, there's some other organism growing inside of you that's affecting your life in ways you don't really notice. And it's really anchored in the idea of symbiogenesis theory, which is one of the theories of life, of evolution. I don't know if you are familiar with it, but it's kind of one of the theories of how two different organisms combined to create what you would call a cell. So you have these bacteria and this archaea that kind of like one ate the other, but the one that was eaten didn't die. And I was like, oh, I can actually live inside of here. And then from there, it started evolving together into us, or everything you see around you. So it really thinks about time as a kind of geological time scale where things that you think are impossible or very unlikely could eventually happen. And I know that this sounds kind of crazy, and the reality is that it is kind of crazy, but nature is already doing some crazy stuff. If you think about it, plants eat sun. I mean, it's obvious, right? Photosynthesis, like you see it every day, or like our life is just dependent on the sun. And yeah, the sun has been there forever. It's always been shining, always present, always radiating. It makes so much sense that everything kind of evolved to around the sun. Like there's the color green you see is a direct response of sunlight. So all of life on the Earth has been kind of growing because of, I guess, being shaped because of that fact. But today we're starting to introduce new sources of energy into our ecosystem. We're starting to change our environment. So we started thinking of how could nature evolve in the next, like in the future, due to some of the changes that we're introducing. And in particular, we got kind of really into antennas. Because you start seeing them everywhere. Like they're in this building, they're outside. They're also like in natural landscapes. Sometimes they're these guys. Sometimes they're very, very featured, or like they're like a landmark. But they're kind of everywhere. And we started really looking into Wi-Fi as a potential source of future energy. Because Wi-Fi is obviously everywhere, right? Like we almost depend on it. We live our lives through it. When you go to a new place, the first thing you are like, oh, what's the Wi-Fi password? It's such a part of our lives. And it's also, it exists inside of the electromagnetic spectrum, just like sunlight. It's just like sunlight, but at a different part of the spectrum. And so it's a lot less energy than sunlight, but it's, at least right now, it's kind of omnipresent everywhere. Like even in dark spaces, right? In the subway, sometimes there's Wi-Fi. So we started thinking of ways, kind of imagining what would happen if it continues to exist. What would happen if there's Wi-Fi for the next billion years? Could there be another organism that grows to eat the Wi-Fi? But how? So before I go deeper into that, I think a lot of our research at Morakana, a lot of our projects start with the research, like trying to imagine. We find something like strange, and then we start going into that. And then a lot of it's anchored in nature, things that are actually happening around us. And we got very inspired by lichen. Are you familiar with lichen? Yeah, I see some smiles, I see nods. Lichen is everywhere. It looks very differently in different places. You can kind of see it on the street, on the park, on the trees, on an antenna, growing, on a building. And if you look closer, you start seeing something, I guess, fun for some, fun for me. You will eventually find like algae cell trapped inside of this fungi. And this is interesting for a couple of reasons. Normally fungi they don't produce photosynthesis, they don't photosynthesize, so they have to find nutrition in other ways. But lichen is actually a fungus that can photosynthesize through algae and other organisms like some bacteria, cyanobacteria. And there's also other things in lichens, because it's obviously growing in nature, so everything is kind of mixed together. But at its core, there's like the idea of algae and a fungi the fungi makes the scaffolding, kind of trapping an algae. And then as the algae photosynthesizes, the fungi will just eat the sugars that are produced in the process. And then it's kind of this classic symbiotic organism. So we started thinking a lot of symbiosis through this lens. What would it mean for an organism to adopt technology as part of the organism itself? And we started kind of exploring different some of these experiments were a total failure, but some of them were more successful. These were some early experiments of trying to grow mycelium on printed circuit boards. On the top right, you see an Arduino being kind of eaten by the mycelium. That one didn't make it very far, but the lamp on the left, the cactus from the beginning, it actually survived, and like the electronics kept working, and the mycelium was thriving. Something very interesting that happened is that the cable was actually covered completely in this mycelium. Like here you can see it again as well. Like this thing that comes out, it's technically the mushroom of the mycelium. So it's kind of like the flower of the fungi. So these were really covered cables, and it was kind of surprising for us to see. And we started kind of thinking of this idea of using kind of technology or hardware and mycelium to create this version of lichens. And we also started going into Wi-Fi and how can you harvest Wi-Fi, and then how can you grow the mycelium in different types of substrates. Here we were looking at metallic mesh. Why? Because this metallic mesh is kind of like a parabola, which in some ways is very similar to like an antenna. So we were using this mixed antenna to reflect Wi-Fi, to concentrate in a single point to like harvest more energy. And then let's see if this works. Here you can see it growing. In real life, it doesn't look like that. It looks like nothing is ever changing. So if you ever work with mycelium, I would recommend setting a camera for a time lapse. This maybe took 2 weeks or more. It's actually quite fun. Thierry would make fun of it because I would say it's exciting like Game of Thrones, because you would see things are happening. At some point, some parts got contaminated by a different type of organism. And the only way to see what's happening is to keep taking pictures for a week and then see the time lapse and see what happened. Because everything is so slow. So you're seeing it, and then you have to wait another week to see what happens next. So yeah, it's very cliffhanger. It's like, what's gonna happen? I don't know. I have to wait another week. But from there, we started kind of modeling the system. We continue modeling these parabolic shapes, mixture of copper, mycelium, and then an antenna in the center. And then from there, kind of imagining what would happen if you point them in different directions to create like a 360 map of the environment through these organisms. The finished piece looks like this. You can kind of see the antennas. And then there's in total 12 of them pointing in different directions. And each antenna has a microcontroller, some lights, and this circle right there is a motor. It's a vibration motor. And the reason we decided on this is because the mycelium by itself doesn't pick up Wi-Fi signals, right? But the antenna does. So how can we translate or transcribe these signals into something that the organism actually experiences, being light and motion? So we have this hardware translator or amplifier of the signals to interact with the mushroom. This image kind of shows visual representation of how the signal is changing around the organism and how that's translated towards the inoculated, we call it, the organism. And this project really starts thinking about really extending life timescales and asking kind of who has the right to evolve and with whom and how. Like, obviously, when we think of evolution, we tend to think of something that happened in the past, like maybe millions of years or billions of years before us. And yeah, of course, that's when it happened, but it's also happening now. So you can also think about how it's going to happen in the future, right? If you think about it, in a million years, your dog will probably not look like your dog anymore. I mean, you don't have to go very far. Dogs didn't look like that 500 years ago. Like, how is it going to keep changing? How are we going to change? How is a tree going to change? So really thinking about just these non-human timescales, like how things start evolving, and also thinking about technology as something that is obviously very human, right? But for us, technology means like being connected, being access to knowledge, right? Being able to just find the answer for something. Or being able to move somewhere fast, or it means so much things to us, but for other things, other organisms in the ecosystem, it's something that they are now living with, right? Like it's in their ecosystem. It's something that they're adapting to, even they want it or not. So really thinking of technology as just, I guess, something beyond just human made or human object, but it's affecting everybody, and how can technology start being used by other organisms. So thinking a lot of that. And the chance for something like this to happen is probably very low. So I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's also, as small as it is, it's probably not zero. And that's interesting because time is very long. Which brings us to another project that I want to share with you. Ooh. No, not that one. This is almost surely. Almost surely is a probability term of something that is very unlikely to happen, but given enough time, it will happen. Like, what are the chances that if I type random keys on my keyboard, I will write my name? Well, you can think about it very easily. Like, let's say my name was just Seb, S-E-B. There are like, I don't know, 50 keys on the keyboard, so it's like 1 over 50 that I would get the S. And then for me to get the E, it would be like 1 over 50 divided by 50. And then for me to get the B, it would be 1 divided by 50 divided by 50 divided by 50. It starts shrinking. But then, so if I were to bet that I get my name correctly randomly, the first try, it wouldn't really work. But if I tell you I have 2 tries, well, it still wouldn't work. But if I had 10,000 tries or 10 million tries, at some point, somebody's gonna get it right. So this is almost surely, it kind of cheats. As you type, some words, some letters are selected, but some letters are rejected. And this tells the story of one day in the office at my job. Let's see if I can get it. So as you're typing different, a message starts getting revealed. I should write like a magic combination of words that will trigger what happens.
Is it always this story? Is there like multiple?
It's always this story, because you're at the office and people start, you run out of things to say, and then somebody comes up with a crazy question. Oh, I forget there's a question mark. And this became a thing, like where I don't know why somebody was afraid of losing a finger, and they were like, "Well, what if you learn a new language?" And then, yeah, what would happen? Would I still type in my computer? Well, maybe, yeah. And then once you finally get it, there's this thing that happens, and then kind of imagining this mycelium organism coming. If you type faster, then the screen is all white. It's kind of dramatic. Yeah. So kind of really thinking about time as this thing that will, just because it's very unlikely, it doesn't mean that it won't happen. And then if you make time long enough, it might actually happen. Maybe not this way, but in a different way. This next project is one of our recent projects, and it came through a research paper that we read about, I guess I'll just read it. Why insects' memories may not survive metamorphosis. And it kind of triggered many things at us. It's like, I guess it makes you think of some things that you never thought before, like kind of caterpillar, kind of butterfly. Remember what it felt like to be a caterpillar? And well, this article suggests that it's probably not possible because kind of everything just gets turned into mush. All the neurons kind of reconfigure, the connections break. So those neurological pathways are destroyed or kind of allow room for something else. But then we also found this other research paper that suggests that certain memories will actually make it through metamorphosis. And the way they test this is like they would train these caterpillars to respond to certain scents. And then as they transform, they found that the moths or the butterflies will actually respond to the scents that the caterpillars were trained on. So, I don't know, I thought there was something really interesting in that kind of state of transformation and remembering. And it also really made us think about the opposite. So nobody in these papers is suggesting that or questioning that, which is kind of interesting for us, is does a caterpillar have any sorts of intuition or reconnaissance of the next stage of their life as kin? Like, would they recognize a butterfly as like, oh, that's me in the future? Or like, that's my brother? Like, or would it just be a completely different thing? And I think that kind of resonated with us, is like how maybe in a more immediate or human way, like we're going through these things, we don't usually understand what's happening to us or how that's affecting us or how that will transform us until sometimes too late, not too late, but later on. And this led us to one of our latest projects called histolysis. Histolysis is that process where the matter or the organs or the body gets kind of smushed into this pulp. It gets kind of reconfigured, and then through the metamorphosis transformed. Something interesting is that most of insects, which means most of living organisms beyond like plants or like algae, go through metamorphosis. So it's actually kind of rare that we don't. Like just like probabilistically speaking, most organisms do. And these organisms, they have the same DNA from like their larva stage or their pupa stage until like their final stage, which is also interesting. It's like we normally think about DNA as this thing that shapes us the way we are, and it's true, but how is it possible that the same DNA is the same thing responsible of these three organisms that completely look very differently? And there's like, I think the research is also very exciting in that realm of what triggers certain genes versus others. But I guess I'll bring it back to the project. This is histolysis. Histolysis is a root-like system. So we're inspired, like we were thinking a lot of like a root or a network, but we were also very inspired by the movement of this like worms or caterpillars or this peristaltic contraction movement. And this video kind of shows some of the process, but the installation is made by a series of nodes that they are all the same, but they connect magnetically. So you can kind of rearrange it in different ways. It's mostly 3D printed, and there's also a surface of printed circuit boards. So thinking a lot of hardware, like a physical material that you can play and interact with. It has these carbon fiber rods that keep tension, and then these strings that pull. So there's like this combination of compression and I guess the tension of the strings. So here you can kind of see it in slow action. Thinking a lot of like that idea of moving through this organism, like chunk by chunk. We want the organism to feel very foreign or like non-human. Like you don't understand what's happening. You see something is happening, but you don't know where it is or where it's going or even what came before. So there's always this movement, change. Here you see some of the details. Each module has 3 motors that pull the cables, and that creates the contraction, the tension. And here you can see everything is magnetic, so you can connect 2 nodes and then it would be powered all of a sudden. And something that we were thinking a lot is how to show this piece. We decided to show it kind of low towards the floor, and people were asking us like, why do you put it on the floor? for us, it was important because we wanted to kind of get outside of this human perspective where everything is just like at the right height and kind of force people to like look down or kind of get out of their own like perception or body to just start getting out of that mental space, yes. And then here are some other shots. I realized that through the beginning of my presentation I was rushing a lot, but so yeah, thank you. I can show other things as well, or I can do more like just open the floor, have a conversation. I don't know if you have any immediate questions or.
Great. Thanks, Seb. So if anyone has any question, right off the bat, go ahead and raise your hand. Maybe I have a quick one while everyone else is thinking. So I think one thing that's really interesting about you and Thierry's practice is that it kind of sits, that's Thierry, yeah. It kind of sits in the context of like a broader sort of research like agenda or interest. And I'm just kind of like wondering, the students, there are some from a few programs here, but the ones in the CDP, they'll be making work in relation to research and kind of researching and then making projects off of that research. So like how do y'all kind of approach the projects that you choose to take on, how they fit into the research, like which comes first, et cetera?
Yeah, I think although we do a lot of work with scientists and science, we are not scientists, and that's kind of liberating for us because we had certain freedoms that like a scientist doing academic research don't have. So a lot of it in our process starts with questions or we find something interesting and then kind of start exploring that further. I like to describe that our work exists imagine like this huge concrete building, and then like you're walking by and then you see that there's a little crack, and then you like zoom in into this crack and you start noticing that there's things living in there, and kind of you start imagining these worlds inside of this crack and exploring and developing in them, not with the idea that the crack will actually turn down the building, but it's just like these things that you didn't notice and didn't know they existed, but there's a little universe in that space. So kind of building that space, building that idea, and kind of imagining what will happen if you continue in that direction.
Hi, thank you so much. Your guys' practice is really beautiful and resonates with a lot of my personal research interests. Kind of on the note of what you just said in terms of where you feel like your work situates itself, in kind of the image of a large building, but it being a crack into kind of all of these smaller worlds, I guess, made more visible. I'm just curious if what your thoughts are on, you mentioned like designing to kind of visualize longer time scales, designing for longevity, designing for more natural systems that operate at non-human scales and in non-human timeframes. And in terms of, like, I guess, applying that kind of thinking and methodology in terms of like trying to visualize like different time scales and designing for that at larger scales, like be it actually at the scale of a building or like in terms of larger infrastructure. I don't know if you think that's like, that would kind of lose some kind of meaning that you guys are conveying in like these, I guess, smaller scale projects and them being very like focused on these like smaller systems that are actually very, I guess, invisible and kind of everywhere, but also nowhere at the same time. Sorry if this is like jumping around. I hope that's clear, but I'm just thinking like, is this, like, what are your thoughts on this being, applied in larger scales, say of like biomimicry and, scales of design that are larger than these like smaller interventions.
I think if you, by the way, we're still looking for somebody to show our work for the next 1 billion years. So if you in the future or somebody you know has a place to offer, we have this piece, the one with the mushrooms. But to answer your question, I think it's very hard to build something to last more than a couple hundred years. There are some projects. There's obviously architecture that's lasted for more than like a couple of thousand years. You have like this pyramids or like ruins nowadays that have been for more than a couple of thousand years. But there's contemporary projects. I don't know, like if you've ever heard of the 10,000 year clock, where it's a project that how would you ensure you can keep track of time for the next 10,000 years? So very long time scales that mean a lot to people in a way that people will never be able to experience. So I think, or there were also some like more like of the opposite side of the spectrum, like how do you ensure that this radioactive site stays far away from humans for the next 10,000 years? Like really long time scales challenge of how, like they're complex problems. Like how do you ensure language persists over the next, like you cannot just write like danger because you don't know if that word would mean anything in the next 100 years, 200 years. So I think as we continue with our projects, we want to make them happen as close as we can possibly bring them to life. But at the same time, that's not like the number one goal to make sure that this will last for 1 billion years. We probably wouldn't make it out of acrylic or like 3D printed material. So we're very interested in the questions and the kind of how it creates this change in perspective in people or in ourselves that, I didn't know that was possible. And then it kind of makes you question your reality and being like, what else is possible? Like, or like maybe the way I saw or I perceive things is not always fully real, right? Like there's I find it's very hopeful. Like, I don't know if that's answering the question.
Yeah. Yes, I think like I was less meaning like designing for like preservation of like certain architectural elements. Like I'm actually really interested in the process of something going through a cycle of decay and kind of changing and evolving over time. And so was kind of thinking like, how could you adapt that at larger scales and kind of adapt to, I guess, both long time scale thinking, but also allowing for like evolution to occur as you were talking about. So but thank you. Very interesting.
Yeah, then I think like making that thing that you're making alive and giving it the chance to like change. And then, because that's kind of the thing that will last the longest is just life, hopefully. Like even at the microscopic scale is at some point it becomes really hard to get rid of life once it's there. So if you base your organism or your design in a living organism, then it allows it for like repairing and evolving construction.
Hi, thank you so much for the presentation. It was really nice. It made me think about a lot of those pieces, even this one, made me think a lot about evolution as a concept. and how technological evolution and biological evolution were considered to be two different concepts and timelines altogether. But right now, like there is this inevitable collide of both in a way. So I'm sure you've thought about this a lot, but I want to understand your thoughts about, at the end of the day, are both the evolutions going to transform into something that's symbiotic? And maybe we as humans are like the catalyst of maybe doing that?
Yeah, and that's something we think a lot about, especially in the past like 3 years, 2 years. With symbiotic, you mean like, because I guess symbiosis can mean a couple different things, but you mean like,
So there is this concept where technological evolution is not considered artificial. It's considered to be biological because it's done by us, right? And all the technology eventually evolves through the materials found in the universe. So it kind of, if we think through a wider perspective, it is biological. But because our point of view is very small on evolution and the time frame that humans live is very small compared to the universal timeline, we tend to think of it as something alien, but it's not. So it's like the same thing. Both the evolutions are not two different evolutions, but just a single evolution. But our understanding of it is kind of, it's just like a theory. So.
right? No, I think it's fascinating. I don't know if I formally had studied that, but I certainly like in that mind space. Yeah, and through our work, we often try to combine them quite literally. I was reading this other book where the author was talking about how do you know something is living, because there is like this guidelines that if you like check this, some of these boxes, you are probably alive, but it's not very clear. Like everything has exceptions. So there's this new theory called assembly theory, where by looking at the complexity of something and the number of times you find that, you would be able to say that that was living versus non-living. And one of the examples is that the author gives is, if you found a screwdriver on a different planet, it would 100%, or not 100% because nothing is that certain, but it would indicate that there's a high likelihood of life, because the chances of that happening just by pure random are almost zero. So I guess that kind of relates. You don't think about a screwdriver as being alive, but it's part of this living system, what you were describing. So yeah, definitely.
Hi, I really enjoyed your presentation and all of your work. Like, it really feels like all of your work are trying to like merge the biological ideas into the digital world. So especially, I was, the most interesting for me was the Wi-Fi eater. Like, it feels like you're trying to like use the like digital energy to manipulate the fungus. So I was curious about the output you made for the exhibition. So it's basically like generating the light so that fungus will not grow in that area. Is that right?
So yeah, the I guess you're correct. By its nature, it will not grow if there's very strong light. But light is something that it responds to, right? Like it's one of the things that you know that the organism is affected by. So here we're using it less to prevent growth or accelerate growth, more of a means to communicate. Because we know that the organism can actually detect this. The same idea with vibration. We know that the mycelium is sensitive to these vibrations. So it was more of a means to establish that translation in a way that kind of, again, imagining what would happen if these were to grow together for like a really long period of time. Maybe at some point it will start translating and reacting to these inputs. So it was less about trying to create something immediate, more of creating a bridge between something that we know that it already happens and something that doesn't happen, Wi-Fi eating. So it was more of creating that connection.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Questions?
Yeah, also thank you. I really enjoyed the presentation. I was wondering, when you're conceiving of a project in the early stages, how do you determine what medium you want? Like from my perspective, there's a fork between like a digital screen-based interface and then like your IRL projects. And yeah, what considerations do you have from like audience to lifespan? And yeah.
Usually the project starts with just the questions, kind of, and the space of like what, and like really at the beginning it's very hard to see what this is going to look like or how it's going to manifest. And you're just kind of following that thread or grabbing another thread somewhere else and trying to start weaving anything and see if that holds anything. And if it does, kind of keep going. The ones that are purely digital, like the cells, this one, often come in response to a prompt. Like here we were invited by online magazine to create this HTML, JavaScript piece. In particular, this was for the HTML review. It's a computational poetry website. So we were thinking a lot of like, how can we make poetry with these organisms in a way that feels, where you can sense the computation, but it doesn't feel computer made or automated. So that organic part to it. The more physical installations, they take a really long time to make, maybe like up to a year of kind of thinking, researching, and doing experiments, and then kind of the project starts coming into life naturally. Hello. I was just showing the Wi-Fi eaters. Tony here was helping with some of the installations here, the production. So yeah, kind of allowing for that room of the piece to kind of come out from the research. Like we do a lot of, you can kind of see it here. This project started with this, not these ones, but these mock-ups of tension and compression. And at the time, we didn't know if it was going to be one unit or many units or a tower, and then kind of following that. It's a lot of intuitive work, kind of seeing what's working, what's taking you somewhere interesting. Yeah.
Maybe I have a question related to Ellie's, which is on, aside from being like researchers and talented engineers, you're also clearly very good designers, and these pieces are, very aesthetically advanced and beautiful, especially a lot of the installation work. Like, how do you, I don't know, think about the aesthetic development of like a piece with the kind of research and the function of it, et cetera? It's kind of an open-ended question, but I think it might be relevant for a lot of that.
For things like that, working in teams will always be helpful because you get a chance for like miscommunication, and then you're like, what was that? And then you're always trying to communicate with the other person, and you all have your ideas, and then there's also like the mistakes in between, that lack of being able to communicate that allows for other new ideas to occur. Plus just the other opinion. Like sometimes Thierry will sketch something and then I'll try to build it, or the other way around. So I think, yeah, definitely working with teams allows for that. And I think some of the software that we use for 3D modeling, for example, it's engineering software. So it's actually like very rigid and boxed. And like you make a square and make a rectangle, and you're crazy, you make a circle. So really kind of challenging that and trying to like use software in ways that it's not meant to be, or like trying to discover new ways. And we do a lot of custom tools as like internal tools for our project as well.
Anyone else? Any last questions for Seb? Okay. We're good then. Thanks again.
No, thank you.